Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, fellow subscribers and viewers. Thank you for tuning in, and want to send out loads of thanks and appreciation to all of you who have been tuning into these live casts and or viewing them. The idea behind these live casts is to express opinions and certainly have uh, reasonable amounts of discussion about all of the products that all of us are interested in. This evening's discussion is going to be tailored around the three-cylinder motorbikes, and Triumph in particular. We have had some lengthy discussions about Triumph motorcycles, Triumph triples in particular, relative to the sport bike genre, and have been trying to figure out what direction Triumph Motorcycles is going in with respect to their product lines with the Street Triple, the Daytona 675R, which has been a very successful bike for them, and there's sort of been this ambiguity as to, or at least we've felt, I know that I've felt, that there's been a great deal of ambiguity surrounding which direction Triumph wants to move, because their product line has gotten quite broad. They've extended their product line to adventure bikes and cruisers and so forth. And the contention was, and I guess the burning question is, that's been on some people's minds, it's certainly been on my mind, is Triumph going to give us a new Daytona 675? Or are they going to give us something in addition to the Daytona 675 or the Street Triple 675? Now, the other bike that's part of that whole equation is obviously the Speed Triple, which was really the original Street Fighter, and that evolved out of the Daytona 955 back in the mid to late 90s, and it seemed that it was a huge success for them. The 955 was, I guess, meant to compete with some of the leader bikes, but didn't do very well. So apparently they changed the strategy. They took the fairings off, and they say, let's make it a naked, changed the gearing and so forth, and thus it became conceivably or arguably the first the first turnkey Street Fighter, I guess you could say, that was available to the masses, and thus the Street Fighter and the naked sport bike class began to grow. And Triumph, I would say, is probably one of the more instrumental companies in making that happen. So why don't what we're going to do is we're just going to try to navigate our way through this, and the reason why this discussion sort of cropped up was because when I own a Triumph. First of all, let me just put that out on the table. I have a Street Triple 675. I bought it as a base model. That base model has since become I guess what you would call a high-spec Street Triple R. Yeah, yeah. It has the R-Spec front forks, and it has the Öhlins TTX suspension on the rear, and it's been dressed up a little bit. But anyway, when I saw the new Street Triple RX, it kind of reminded me mildly of my bike, but I had to scratch my head, and I sort of wondered, you know, what is Triumph doing with this? And so Blue is with us as my co-host.
Hello.
As part of MotoZone TV, sponsored by Zone Television and Zone Television Media. And so, Blue, why don't you help take us kind of through this
Quagmire.
this quagmire. Well, maybe it's not a quagmire. What I can say, what I do know, and I can say with some degree of certainty, that Triumph, I believe, made a 20% cut across the board with respect to their company expenditures. I believe, I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I guess you could say I heard through the grapevine words to that effect. If that's not entirely true, I stand to be corrected. So any information that is delineated out there to the public, we obviously encourage discussion, opinion, and even spirited debate is welcome as long as there is respect, some degree of respect. Although I'm somewhat guilty of not entirely being able to retain my decorum in some of my rebuttals. But anyway, and I would probably have to apologize for that, but I'm having a hard time apologizing for just what appears sometimes to be, it's frustrating sometimes. But anyway, so where we are right now is Triumph has for sale available. They have the Street Triple base model. They have a new colors, I guess, offering. They have the Street Triple R, and now I believe they have a third model, if I'm not mistaken. It's the Street Triple RX. And my first inclination when I saw the bike, it just meant like, what the heck is this X business? I mean, why did they even need to put another alphanumeric expression on amend this X to the? I mean, it was really frustrating because obviously they weren't. What they did was they're putting, and I guess this was probably because a lot of people were taking Daytona rear ends and putting it on the Street Triple because they felt it looked better. And so I guess Triumph decided, well, let's just give them a Daytona rear end, powder coat the wheels red, and put a belly pan on there, and so on and so forth, and let's call it the RX. And for crying out loud,
it's not an extra model, is it? Despite the X, it is replacing the standard, is it?
I don't know if is it replacing the R?
Well, I was under the impression this was a that this was a replacement, but I suddenly have a moment of doubt.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is not actually the key point to this. It's not the key point to the discussion. I'm distracting us all.
So, well, I guess what I'm trying to, what's been bouncing around in my mind, and based on the information that I've gotten thus far, I've been trying to get a sense of what are they doing. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, they've not really. Well, I think that there's the new Tiger and the new Tiger XC, but that essentially just looks like a revamp of what they already have, just different color schemes. And that's essentially what they've been doing across the board. Triumph has been offering different color schemes, and that's fine. I don't have a big problem with that. The Street Triple, the Street Triple R, the Daytona 675, all phenomenal bikes. I mean, these are in my opinion, these are world-class bikes at a very attractive price, and it's been successful. But now we have other manufacturers that are upping their game, and the Triple has sort of been an ambiguity, I think, a lot in a lot of people's minds. The 3-cylinder engine, and anybody who knows anything about motorcycles that would know that the Triple does have a rather long history. And a successful history at that. With obviously, we talked a little bit about the Kawasaki H2 750 air-cooled Triple, which was the fastest bike in the world. I believe Triumph had set a land speed record with their 650cc inline Triple back in the 1960s, if I remember correctly. And more recently, Jason DeSalvo. I think when he was racing with Lattice Racing back in, I know that he won for Ducati on the 848 in 2011, and in 2012 he took second place. He almost, and it was very close, but he almost took first place, but he came in second in 2012 on the Daytona 675 motorbike. And then fast forward to this year, 2014. Danny Eslick with Riders Discount Racing took a first place win at the Daytona 200 on the Triumph 675 Riders Discount Triumph, and which was the first win at that race for Triumph since was it Nixon was his last name, if I remember correctly. Gary Nixon. Thank you. And in fact, I think this coming year they're offering a Gary Nixon sort of tribute Bonneville or something like that, or they have the blue and white colors coming on.
The Rob North Triumphs, they were called, I believe.
Oh, okay, okay, I stand corrected.
No, sorry, that was the designer, not the racer.
Okay, okay, very, very good. And all of you Daytona 675 fans out there and loyal Triumph fans, I think may have been having sort of the same question mark. Like, are they? One of the big questions for me, and I wrote this in one of my blogs, is Triumph going to give us a leader bike, and or do they have? Obviously, the technology is there to do it. The speed triple has gotten long in the tooth. It's heavy. It's 135-ish horsepower, I believe, and I think it has like 80 some odd foot-pounds of torque, if I'm not mistaken. But it's gotten long in the tooth, and the other Street Fighters that are the other offerings in the naked sport bike class, Street Fighter class, such as the Aprilia Tuono, the KTM Super Duke 1290, and now EBR's new 1190R, what is it, SX, and a few other BMW's S1000R. So you have a whole host of other Street Fighters that are coming online, and it seems like the Triumph Speed Triple is kind of fading off into the abyss of, almost being like, what's going on here? And that's kind of been my thought about it. So maybe you could, Blue, you could enlighten the viewers and the listeners on as to what you think. This is speculation, of course, but speculation based on some of the understanding of what at least I know Blue has of the company and the company's history and so forth. So why don't you walk us through that a little bit?
Okay. It's perhaps worth mentioning that the modern Triumph is not actually the same company as Triumph historically. Triumph Engineering, as it actually was the name, went into receivership back in the early 80s, and the current owner bought the name and manufacturing rights from the liquidator back then. Essentially, he took the next 7 or 8 years to design and build the new range of bikes that were released in 1990. The clever thing about those models and that exist to today is they're essentially modular. By that we mean that they have an engine that can be used in various different models. They have subframes that can be used in various different models. So it's sort of a mix and match to create a variety of different motorcycles, all with their own character. Now, John Bloor, who is the chap that owns the current Triumph, put in a huge amount of money into creating this company. He wanted to challenge the Japanese. He didn't want to just be another British boutique maker that makes a few high-priced retro reissue motorcycles. He actually wanted to be a modern motorcycle manufacturer and to beat the Chinese, the Japanese at their own game. That was a bit of a struggle to start with, in fairness. But really, the triple is what changed all that. Certainly in this super sport class, they did try with 4-cylinder bikes initially, but with the Daytona 675, I should say, they did manage to get a much more interesting bike. The problem essentially is that is as higher capacity as it can be, given the size, the physical size of the engine. As I understand it, there is no room to overbore that engine. So in the Tiger, the adventure bike they have, which is a bike based on the 675 is then an 800cc engine, but it's a long stroke, and the piston, there's a maximum speed that pistons can move within an engine. And in order to be sufficiently fast revving, ultimately the stroke would have to be too long for an 800. So fine in an adventure bike, but not much cop in a sports bike. And so really all of these people that were turned on and convinced by the triple in the Triumph Daytona 675 really had nowhere to go. And I know you've said this yourself, that you've convinced a whole bunch of people that this is a good engine style, that this offers a nice compromise between the torque of a V-twin and the high rev power of an inline 4, which are sort of the two main engine types for a long time. And the triple offers a compromise between the two. The problem being is they've never offered a sports bike above the 675. You mentioned there the speed triple itself. That engine really is too heavy and slow revving to be considered a sports bike engine. It was fine for a 1990s or even early 2000s naked sports bike, but really has been left behind now by the current competition, and I'm not sure that Triumph are really doing very much with it. After they introduced the R model with the Öhlins forks and slightly fancier wheels and a red subframe, that was the last update they gave it, which I think was a few years ago now, and I'm not sure, I've certainly not heard any rumours that they're planning on building a new one. The same is true with the triple. They updated it a couple of years ago and have just done this RX oddity now. And while we have some sympathy for the idea of just tarting up, for lack of a better way of putting it, tarting up existing models, it does beg the question of where you go in the future. And the problem I see for Triumph going forward is that for every year that passes where all they do is polish what they already have, essentially release the same model but with a different color or a different slightly different suspension, they put themselves in danger of falling further and further behind the competition. And ultimately the 675 shot straight to the top of its class. And it would be a shame, really, for them to lose focus now, and as to which way they're heading. So, quite aside from not offering anywhere for people to go, I'm not even sure they're aware of what they're going to be offering in the future. I hope I'm wrong with that, but I haven't seen any indication yet of having a clear idea of where they want to go next.
Mm-hmm. What would you?
And that's a problem.
What would you say to, of course, there's the adage, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, type of deal. There was some say, well, you have a good thing, don't screw it up. I guess a textbook example of that would be Royal Enfield, for example. A company that was originally a British company that has since went out of business, but was all of the tooling and so forth was bought by an Indian company, and now these bikes are being produced in India, and with, I guess, some moderate success, I would say, and they've not really changed much. I guess they've updated the electronics and offered fuel injection and so forth, but apparently they've been able to survive for a number of years. So what would you say to the person that at Triumph would say, well, we don't want to really change our products right now because they're doing okay, but before you answer that, my response, I know that what my response would be, in that, look, you're really, I love the bike. The bikes are great, but I want to advance or move up into something else, and it's not an adventure bike. And if I understand correctly, if we're being somewhat objective here, as much as I love Triumph, and I even like their parallel twins and their Bonnevilles and the Scrambler's a great bike. But even those, I think, are becoming, as a side note, I'm not trying to get too far off track, but those bikes are actually starting to get a little bit long in the tooth as well, and kind of heavy. And I think that Ducati's response with their new Scramblers is really probably caused a stir over at Triumph as well. But to the point, it just makes me wonder where you leave. Then they have their adventure bike, the 1050, okay? And I understand that the 1050cc motor that is in their Tiger adventure bike and the 1050cc motor that is in the Speed Triple are two different motors. Could you elaborate on that?
No.
Okay. Well, that's what I actually learned that, but somebody had mentioned, I don't know if it was in a thread, but they said that it may have even been one of the reviewers of Gizmag, I'm not sure, but they had said that the block is not the same as the one that's in the you know.
Well, in the Speed Triple.
Right, and they said that it had problems or issues and stuff. And anybody who knows something about this, feel free to comment. If I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, then I stand to be corrected. But I do recall reading somewhere or hearing somewhere that the motor that's in the Tiger 1050 and the motor that's in the Speed Triple are not the same. So, you know, there's another sort of ambiguous side note to all of this. But here again, if we're talking about street fighters, and again, the Speed Triple was originally a sport bike, and it morphed into what it is today. And then they had the 650, the Triumph 650, which was an inline four, and that was the, if I understand correctly, it was the only inline four that Triple ever made. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't know you were waiting for me to, waiting to agree. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then that didn't do very well. They were trying to compete with the Japanese inline fours, and so they just trashed that whole idea. And
yeah, I mean, they persisted with it for a little while, but certainly it was at the back of group tests of the time, and really the only time that really sprang forward was when they introduced the Triple in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
Then suddenly they had something unique to offer people. The problem with offering the same as the Japanese is that really certainly at that time, the Japanese ruled the world as far as motorcycles went. They outsold all the, well, let me say possibly not Harley Davidson, but they certainly outsold the vast majority of other manufacturers. And the problem with offering something similar is that what real reason did people have to go and buy a Triumph? Unless you were being particularly patriotic if you were English, or you were particularly an Anglophile if you were from somewhere else. There was really no reason to buy the Triumph Daytona before it was a Triple. It was definitely at the back in group tests, whereas once you got to the Triple, again, as I say, it's offering something new, offering an alternative, and on top of that was a great bike.
And they also had the Speed 4, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was a naked as well, wasn't it? I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this RX business is just, I'm sorry, I really want to say pathetic.
I mean, to my mind, it's just lazy. It's just lazy. You know, splashing a bit of colour on it, putting a different subframe on it. As we mentioned, this is really what saved Triumph, in fairness, so I don't want to give them too much of a bashing, is the idea of using a modular design. You take bits off other bikes to add to this one, make a whole new one. It's a nice idea in theory, but I would like to think they're at the point now where they need to push on, and offer something new to the people that they've convinced into their ideal. I think this brings us relatively nicely onto MV Agusta's F3, that show how you can take an idea, which is, again, using a triple engine in a supersport chassis, thin, agile bike, and initially they brought out with exactly the same capacity, a 675, the MV Agusta F3, absolutely beautiful engine. But
Yeah,
where it's
and just
significant, sorry.
go ahead. And stunning. It just the engineering and the looks of this bike is just I'm sorry. This is, in my opinion, this is the best looking sport bike on the planet. And I'm
I'd
sure
have to agree with you. Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna catch
It's
holy
gorgeous.
hell for that as well. But I'm sure, you know, in this is in my opinion. It's like a Michelangelo. It's like a Rembrandt. It's like you can tell that. I mean, the Castigliones wanted this to be something that you just drop your jaw and drool over. And every time the more I've looked at this bike, and I have to say, because I was really partial to the Daytona 675.
It's a great looking bike, definitely.
But if you compare, I mean, as beautiful as the 675 is, I mean, the Italians have just taken it to a whole. I mean, the lines are similar, if you've noticed. It almost looks like Augusta, because the Daytona came out before the F3, and it seems like the uh, the artist who studied under Tamburini,
Adrian Morton.
Adrian Morton, thank you, who is the graphic or the artist that actually penned this new design, took some cues from some of the Daytona line. This is actually a newer rendition, but maybe if we go back to like an '06.
I think actually this example of it doesn't. They haven't fundamentally changed the shape, and actually with the side exhaust shows perhaps a better side-by-side comparison.
Here's if you look. This is interesting, and I don't know if this was deliberate or not, but if you look at this, what I have up on screen, which is an '06 675 in red, if you look at the center portion of the induction or the intake, I think this is probably like a little intake port, if I'm not mistaken. It's not just for aesthetics. And you go over to the M3, you kind of get a little bit of that with a diamond-shaped headlight, sort of echoing that sort of thing, and maybe. But I understand that the Tamburini design was probably. This is more towards the F4, the original F4 design, which was Tamburini's. But
which does beg the question of who's copying who there.
Well, yeah, certainly. And then, of course, I had stated that I had noticed, and this was again another afterthought. When I began to look at these, the triple exhaust that actually sort of conforms to the curvature of the wheel as well, it reminded me of the Greek god. I think it's a Greek, or is it Roman? I'm sorry, it's a Roman god, Mercury, and the little feathers at the feet there. And I don't know if that was intentional, but this is an Italian bike, and Mercury was a Roman god, and so I'm just wondering if this was part a thought of that in this design. That's pure speculation on my part, but I just noticed it.
A great detail, though, and a good likeness. You can certainly see the similarity with the design that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the one thing that the F3 shows me against the Daytona is, as you say, I like the Daytona as well. It's a good looking bike, but the F3 shows you a stunning bike, not just a good looking bike, but a stunning bike.
Mm-hmm.
And looks so much more modern. I suppose another argument might be that the Triumph is more timeless, and maybe the MV will age more. But I am tempted to say that the Daytona, essentially, even the modern version, looks rather like the original 2006. And I would like to have done something a bit more. I don't know, a bit different, I suppose, with the new model. And the F3 shows how you could have made something really quite exciting looking. The other thing that is interesting with the F3 is that they have now introduced the 800cc version, which, you know, we were talking about there's nowhere to go with the Triumph 675. They Triumph offer nothing in larger capacity. If people choose to or wish to move up in capacity, they really have nowhere to go, other than perhaps MV Agusta and their 800cc. And okay, it may only be 125 cc's larger, but I think on the road it will be it will be a much easier motorcycle to ride for those extra 125 cc's. There'll be less jumping around on the gear change, and that shouldn't be underestimated in traffic. It can be very tiring to have to keep an engine on the boil, as you would have to with the 675 F3.
Right. I guess what I would want to know, if, you know, as a point of, you know, as a point of reference, is that since you have the F3, and if we could just talk, if you could talk a little bit about the success, because obviously when somebody buys a sport bike, they want to know, well, yeah, it's a great looking bike, but what about its reliability? What about servicing the bike? And of course, is this a bike that's been competitive in racing and so forth? And which are some of the other questions some people might have. It's like, yeah, it's a great looking bike. I mean, some people thought the Hyosung GT 250 and 650 were great looking bikes, but they were just, you know, they were more or less style over substance.
Indeed. I mean, I think that is something people were concerned about with the MV to start with, and certainly there were conversations, particularly with the 675 F3, that perhaps it was released before the electronics were quite right. There have been various updates since then, and the one nice thing that MV are doing, that even customers that have bought the previous items are having the updates of the electronics introduced for free. So as the new bikes become better, even the ones that you've purchased will become better as they update the electronics to suit the new version. Interestingly, the F3, this has been its first competitive year in World Supersport, the 600cc class, which allows 600cc four-cylinder engines, but also allows a three-cylinder, an extra 75 cc's in order to compete on an equal footing with the four cylinders. This year, despite the fact that they have a rider new to the category, with a rider named Jules Cluzel, who actually came from the MotoGP or the Moto2 paddock into World Supersport, they actually won the very first race they competed in, which was at Phillip Island at the beginning of this year, which is astonishing, really, for a brand new motorcycle with a brand new racer. Managing to win the very first race. It was a slightly odd race in as much as that it was run in two parts, and anyway, due to the weather there was some difficulties, but over a 5-lap sprint in the end, the MV certainly proved its worth. Anyway, as we've now finished the season, and the F3 with Jules Cluzel has come second in the championship against Honda, managed to win the championship with Michael van der Mark, who moves up to Superbike racing next year. But Jules Cluzel and MV Agusta with their F3 managed to come second in the championship, which really, if you consider the bike is 2 years old from its road debut, and is in its first year as its race debut, is battling against Honda, who the bike that Honda uses it has been heavily developed for many years, and of course we all know that Honda have had many years of racing at the top flight, and so really for MV to be as close as they are was really quite impressive. and of course are in front of Kawasaki and in front of Yamaha in the World Super. So if anyone wants a win on Sunday, buy on Monday example, the F3 certainly has the credentials. Hello. We seem to have lost our host here, so I shall keep on waffling for a little bit longer, and let's hope that he manages to find us. Interestingly, or to me, interestingly, the figures between the F3 and the Triumph Daytona are very, very similar. The overall dimensions are pretty much the same, and indeed the torque and the brake horsepower figures are largely the same. But what's more interesting to me is that the 800cc cylinder, 800cc engine, obviously offers significantly more, and that is ultimately what I wish Triumph would have done. Given the absence of a Triumph, a larger capacity sports bike, one would have hoped they would have been able to copy MV Agusta's idea and release an 800cc Daytona. Unfortunately, it seems that there may not be room in the engine block to do that. Certainly there isn't the room to increase the bore, which means the only option is to increase the stroke. Unfortunately with that, of course, we reach up against limits of piston speed. Are you back?
I am.
I was filling in wonderfully, of course.
Okay. And I apologize. I just, for some reason, was having technical difficulties.
Well, let me tell you where we've gone over some specs of the F3 and the Triumph Daytona and mentioned that they've had a very successful year in racing. So if you're concerned about the win on Sunday factor, certainly the F3 will suffice.
Electronics has been sort of an ongoing problem for the MV line, particularly with the F3 and, well, the F3 675, which I think was one of the bikes that was one of the many bikes that people were considering, and I think what has got people a little reluctant to pull the trigger on that bike is this ongoing electronics problems. We know the F3 is a ride-by-wire setup, and the problems that were noticed on the track were exacerbated or accentuated on the road, and it caused quite a few of the reviewers to just have to bring it down a notch or two with respect to that. I mean, outside of that, it's been a stellar bike to my knowledge. I understand. Yeah, it's been a stellar bike. Since we're talking about the problems that have plagued the MV line with respect to the F3 and maybe the Brutale and the Dragster, but I think one of the interesting things about this is that I think it was this year's MV 800 Dragster where one of the reviewers had said that they feel like they'd sorted out that snatchiness with the throttle, the ride-by-wire throttle, and they had addressed that. Furthermore, I think it's probably also worth mentioning to the listeners or the viewers that there was an announcement made recently with respect to, and if I can bring it up on a screen share here, I'll try to do that if I can, with an announcement that was made that the upgrades, there's going to be an upgrade to their electronics package and updates, and it's probably also worth mentioning that Mercedes-Benz has now taken an interest in the MV Agusta company. And I believe they have a 20 or a 25% share in the company. And if that's the case, it obviously it sends a signal to say that I think Mercedes-Benz believes in the company.
Indeed. In fact, I was reading a Mercedes-Benz press release on just this, and they refer to it as a long-term technical partnership. So I think that can only be to the benefit of MV Agusta. Obviously, a lot of automotive companies are looking to pair with motorcycle companies. There's a variety of reasons for that, and that's probably a whole other discussion in itself. Essentially, it's to do, certainly in Europe, it's to do with emissions rules, and but as I say, that's probably another topic.
Well, it's similar to the that Audi now owns Ducati, if I'm not mistaken. They actually bought the entire company.
Well, for a while owned parts of Suzuki, but in actual fact, they have since parted company again. But Europe has an incoming rules where the entire fleet that the company produces will have to have below a certain emissions limit, and having both small capacity cars and motorcycles will help offset things like the Mercedes S5 million or whatever it is, right, with huge engine and limo, will help offset limos. So having a little motorcycle will make their company look better. So that's kind of at the core of why automotive companies are interested in motorcycle companies.
Now, since we're talking about and triple cylinder motorcycles, why would somebody explain the merits of the inline 3 versus an inline 4 or a V-twin from a technical point of view?
Okay, well, largely, large displacement motorcycles have come in just two configurations as a general rule. They have come in V-twins, which have been used by the Europeans and the North Americans, and the newer, higher revving inline 4s from Japan, mostly. Both of these have got documented advantages as well as drawbacks. By definition, a V-twin has a larger individual cylinders in order to make a cubic capacity. They have a greater individual mass compared to a 4-cylinder. The larger pistons are able to produce greater power with each time they fire. So each stroke, each time they move up and down in their engine block. However, the heavier mass means that beyond a certain RPM, they will then tail off and will be much slower than the lighter cylinders of an inline 4. So how does that translate to real world performance? Well, the higher level of energy produced by the strokes of a V-twin engine allow a motorcycle to produce great torque at lower RPM because it requires fewer strokes to achieve equal power. But also the V-twin, with sacrificing the high RPM, means that at racetracks particularly, it can suffer, where it can jump out of a corner quickly. Once it gets to a long straight, for instance, they usually suffer awfully against the inline 4. So they can have better acceleration, but generally a lower top speed. Inversely, inline 4s are able to achieve high top speeds, but require a rider to keep the engine at high RPMs, which is not only tiring for a rider, but also means that the bike will be on something of a knife edge. And will be much more tricky to ride in order to while it's making reasonable power. So the idea is the 3-cylinder engine changes this whole paradigm by bridging the gap between these two types. The triple was able to offer road riders, or racers for that matter, the best of both worlds with its unique 3 cylinders. It has a wider power band than an inline 4, providing more low-end torque, but at the same time it's able to produce more high-end horsepower output and a higher red line than a comparable 2-cylinder V-twin. So many people say that the triple has the engine character of a twin and the screaming power of an inline 4. And that's the best way to put it. It's a compromise or a middle ground of the two. But in actual fact, more than just choosing some bits of both, it actually, in some ways, works out better than either.
Well, this is interesting, and did Giacomo Agostini raced for MV Agusta, and I think it might have been a six-cylinder bike that he rode, but I'm pretty sure that there was a year or two that he rode an inline three. But this,
I believe he rode both. Yeah.
Yeah, in any or either case, this speaks to a very important point. It seems like the three cylinders of the three-cylinder motorcycle has now come out of the shadows and has now come to the forefront with respect to, I mean, and it has gained a great deal of respect on the track, and it is proven on the track. The Daytona 675R is testament to that. I think it was it was Glenn somebody. He was a British racer against Hudson Kenner, and it was a Daytona 675 against a Yamaha R6, and
Glenn Richards.
Thank you, Glenn Richards, and it was quite a battle, but that Triumph just was all over him like white on rice, and that R6 wasn't going anywhere. Incidentally, and it probably also bears mentioning, that the Daytona 675 set the fastest lap time. Not only did it win the Daytona 200, but it also set Jason DeSalvo, I believe, set the fastest lap time. He was in the 1 minute 49 second bracket. And ironically, I found this really hard to believe, but it's apparently true, that those bikes, well, even the Yamaha R6 is an extremely fast bike, but I really found it hard to believe that this 675, the 600 class motorcycle, could achieve speeds in excess of 180 miles an hour, and that to me was just, that floored me, because that's superbike territory right there.
I mean, in fairness, 600cc class, the super sport class, is not, in terms of race lap speed, that much slower than 1000cc machines. If you look at something like road racing, real road racing, like the Isle of Man TT, currently the super stock 1000cc, so similar to the bikes that you and I could buy, are running at about 130 mile an hour average speed laps. The 600s are only about 1.5 mile an hour on average slower over the lap, so they're doing 128 plus mile an hour speed laps. So there isn't actually, in flat out terms, a huge difference in the performances. However, with the triple in the Triumph, because of the engine characteristics we talked about, there's even less of a difference, because it's able to have this extra acceleration without losing out on the top speed. And the Triumph and the 200, what's it called? The What's It 200 is a great example of that.
That's just I just find it fascinating, and it also speaks to the point: do you need? Does a person need 1,000 cc's on the road?
Controversial.
It's a very controversial topic, isn't it? And I'd kind of like to bring another bike into, well, maybe a couple of other bikes into this discussion. I don't know if it's too late in the forum to do that, but we have the other offering now from Yamaha has brought back a three-cylinder in their own right, which is the MT-09 if you're in Europe and the UK, and it's the FC-09 if you're in the States. And they've actually, this bike is actually done very well. A lot of people like this bike a great deal. I I sat on one. I've not actually ridden one, but the seat is definitely a little bit wider, but it's light. This is a somewhere around the neighborhood of an 800cc inline triple.
847, I think.
Oh, it's actually it's over 800. Okay, and I understand that it's a little bit more fuel thirsty than the street triple. It sucks up fuel a little bit more, which is probably to be expected of a larger displacement motor. Um, the looks of the bike are fine. I'm not, you know, too overly enthusiastic about the looks, but they're fine. They're fine. And the seating position in this is reminded me a lot more of a dual sport bike than it does a street fighter or a naked sport bike. It's almost, I was thinking to myself, it's kind of like a motard that's trying to be a sport bike, I guess. I don't know, but I think the thinking behind it was to be more of a standard riding, much more of a standard riding position than that of the street triple, so that the rider is not leaning over the handlebars, but the weight bias seems to be more towards the back of the bike, and because it's more towards the back, this makes this bike, and because it has so much torque, very much prone to wheelie. So this is definitely also very much a hooligan bike in its own right. And I've heard also like some questionable things on the mechanics, and I'm probably going to catch holy heck for that as well, but I understand that there were some problems with the timing chain in this bike. Somebody had mentioned, I seem to recall on a thread that somebody had, and if anybody has any other information about that, again, I stand to be corrected. I'm only repeating what I've heard. I've not actually corroborated that claim, but this Yamaha offering it's a very aggressive price, and it's also another inline three-cylinder bike that is available to the masses, and they understand that they just came out with an adventure bike iteration.
It's worth saying, incidentally, as well. I mean, I'm not sure about the American prices, but in England, it's almost £1,500 cheaper than this Triumph
Yeah,
Street.
that's about the same. It's about the same. Yeah, I think this is around 8,000 ish U.S. dollars. The street triple is around what is it, 94 or 9,500. The base street triple is around
I mean,
90.
that's a good chunk of money, really,
Yep.
in anybody's budget, but particularly when you're talking about, the arguably better value bikes such as these naked bikes. It's a lot of tires or a full kit.
Mm-hmm. Or
You can get helmets, you can get a jacket, you can get some good boots, you can get gloves, and still have change for some gas
yep.
by buying this over the street triple. And this kind of fits into what we were saying earlier, doesn't it? About what are Triumph going to do about this attack on both sides? You have Yamaha with their more budget offering. And yet a bike that's a larger capacity, but is still essentially a fun street bike, attacking the street triple on one side, and then you have MV with the F3 attacking the Daytona 675 from the other side.
Well, and also don't forget the MV also has a street. They have two street fighters. They have the Brutale 675. And 800, and they also have the there's the Dragster 800, which is a gorgeous looking street fighter, if I have to say so. And the latest iteration of that bike is just drop dead gorgeous.
And of course, they offer the larger capacity as well, which
Right.
Triumph have yet to do.
And yeah, and this is so now. So Triumph has probably. They've got some homework to do, in my opinion, if they're not already doing it. And of course, who knows? Maybe in a year and a half's time, or maybe next year, they're going to blow us out of the water with some kind of new offering. But it seems to me that they're they've already started to miss the bus because bus has already left the station with some of these already these new models, and offering more horsepower, lighter weights, and certainly world-class components, componentry.
And I think on both sides they look a bit more modern as well.
Yep. Yep, I would have to agree with you there. And so this is why, I mean, if in fact I do end up getting a sport bike, because I've actually mulled over, you know, I'd like to keep my street triple because I love the bike. It's just a great bike. I wouldn't get rid of it. It's just an incredible bike. Been thinking about a sport bike, and if I decide to get a sport bike, you know, what are the offerings out there? We had talked about the RSV4 Aprilia. Great price point and an incredible bike. And then there's this bike here. And being a huge fan of three-cylinder motors and of the triple, I love this bike. This bike is just I don't know. I mean, it's like a work of art. I'm just falling all over myself here just talking about this thing. You know, people are probably saying, okay, you know, all right, we know you like the bike already. Just relax.
I mean, bikes are about more than looks, aren't they? But having a bike that you have to turn around and have one last look at as you shut your garage door shouldn't be underestimated. It is what makes you feel, it gives you a more of an emotional attachment to your bike. And I think it's important.
Yeah, and MV has certainly got that in spades, if I have to say. And if in fact, I think they do. I mean, you know what? I'd almost be willing to say, even with that electronics problem, it seems to me like if you went back and you complained about it a few times, that MV would say, look, you know what? If you're not happy with it, we're going to do, we'll reinstall new electronics, or we'll swap the bike out for you or something. They almost, I don't know, I've never dealt with MV or any MV reps for that matter. And I don't know what the buying experience is like, but I'd probably like to read a little bit about it. But
well, they have said certainly as they update their electronics packages, their MVIX system as they call it, as that gets updates, people that bought bikes right back to the 2012 are getting the new updates for the electronics. So it's not like you bought it and you're just on your own. If you want the updated ones, you have to buy a new bike. They're quite happy to update the electronics to the newest version.
See, now that right there, that's almost kind of like being in a small town, you know, like kind of mentality. I mean, if in fact what you're saying is true, it'd kind of be like, okay, I'm not just buying a bike, I'm buying a concept of, you know, I feel like this bike was actually custom made for me, and they care enough about me as an owner of one of their products to say, listen, we want you to be happy with the bike no matter what, and we're going to make you, you know, we're going to do anything we can to make it happen. I think that's a really great business ethic, you know, that you will go above and beyond to make. Of course, you're going to get customers that, I mean, there are customers out there that are just pains in the asses. And there's just no satisfying them, right?
Yeah.
But if you have anybody who's at least got a room temperature IQ, would appreciate a company that's saying, hey, you know, we want to make things right with you, and we understand.
Well, they're doing what they can, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I think this is what a boutique manufacturer can offer over mass-produced. And it's one, you know, arguably it's one of the few things that they offer over the mass-produced. Some people would say that mass-produced bike makes a lot more sense, but you know, this you say it's like
don't even get me started, because I mean, we already know who probably some of those people are. It's like, oh, you can't go wrong with buying that bike and everything. Yeah, you're probably right, but you know something? I don't want to yawn after I get off the bike.
Yes.
Anyway, I mean, just. Wow.
And quite frankly, really, if you were looking back into your garage, whoever you are, and no matter what brand you feel closely to, really, looking back into your garage, would you ever be disappointed if you look back and saw the F3? I would find it. I've yet to hear someone say they actively don't like it. It is a beautiful looking machine. Of course, there's more to life than looks, certainly in motorcycles. But
well, this is not only style, but there's substance to this bike. You know, there's definitely substance to this bike, and we were talking a little bit about the recent win. There was one win, and I think a second place. If you'd mentioned, I think was the 675 had just
they've had a few. Yeah, they've had a few wins. They won the first race of the year, but they also won the last race of the year, and managed to come second in the entire championship. So,
and this is a small company. If we're
absolutely, going up against the might of Honda, Kawasaki, and Yamaha, it's really quite something special.
I love underdogs. That's probably why. I mean, I like companies like Triumph and EBR and a few of the others. There's a couple of others.
You.
Okay, now we one other triple offering was the Benelli.
Ah, right, yes, larger capacity triple. In fact, they are, as far as I'm aware, the only large capacity triple that you can purchase now. The Benelli Tornado is their sports bike version, and the TNT, I believe, is their naked version of it. This is the 1130cc, I believe, engine, and they are great prices. If you can find them, the company has actually recently been sold to the Chinese.
Oh dear.
Yeah, with everything that entails.
Okay, well,
but there are still some of the older
that's kind of like
Italian.
That's kind of like selling Benelli to the Chinese was kind of like Harley being bought out by AMF, which was a disaster for that company. But I don't know. I mean, the Chinese are great at mass producing stuff, but quality control is.
I mean, I think they bought Benelli to have a European name for their brandless Chinese mid-capacity
This thing
machines.
kind of looks like if you look at this, it looks kind of like a. Am I on screen share?
Yes.
Okay.
You are.
If you. Oh, sorry about that. Where are we? Benelli Tornado. Okay. I'm sorry. This looks like you got like a little bit of a. I don't know. This is a very an oddity front end.
You've taken it off your screen at the minute, incidentally.
Oh, I have. Okay.
It is quite an individual. I mean, one of the things to mention about it, I say about the drop in price. When they were released, they were almost £12,000 in Britain. I have seen them last year, unused, brand new, not pre-registered, going for just over £6,000. I mean, that is a huge saving, bearing in mind that the suspension, it's the gold Öhlins on the front of these bikes. They have high quality suspension at the back. They have, or certain models have carbon fiber fairings. You're getting an awful lot of motorcycle for the money. They're incredibly thin motorcycles as well, because they don't have radiators in front of the engine. They actually have the radiator in the tail. And through some clever piping, managed to feed the air through to the tail, and they have two great big fans under the seat. This is a picture of the under seat there. There's two big fan holes there to suck air through it and keep the engine cool. But great buys and a whole lot of money. Of course, you have to question whether there'll be the same spares back up now that they have been sold to the Chinese. But certainly, if you are after a large capacity 3-cylinder sports bike, you have the choice of one, and it is the Benelli.
Well, anyway, not to belabor the point, but just a few things before we wrap up this evening. First of all, thanks to any of the viewers. If we didn't get to your comments in the chat session of the window, please leave any of your questions in the comments section below this video, and we
Yeah, we
will
love to hear from you. We love to hear from you.
try to answer your questions as expeditiously as we possibly can. If you're interested in joining a Google Plus, a new Google Plus community, it is a private community tailored specifically to three-cylinder motorcycles. If you're looking at the icon up on your screen and you just type in 3, T-H-R-E-E, that's how you spell the number 3. And you see this icon that's up on your screen right now. That is the community, and because it is private, your invitation will be screened because we're trying to avoid trolls as much as possible if we can. But we would like to have you in the community if you're a three-cylinder motorcycle fan. Just be sure to type in just 3 for Google Plus communities, and we'd be happy to have you aboard. And again, Blue is my co-host. It's great to have you. We're probably going to be moving to a different channel very soon. I know we've been saying this, but we're just trying to hash out some of the details because we want to direct the traffic and those of you who are interested in these discussions to that channel. And
do some other programming as well, I think.
Exactly right. Anyway, thank you for being with us tonight.
I'd like to say thank you very much to Lauren Andrews for commenting a few times and enjoying today's program as well. Just to give a personal mention to Lauren there.
Oh, great. And we also want to, again, I want to thank all of the viewers from our previous episodes and all of the new subscribers that are coming aboard. This is really great stuff, and
we will get better. We promise.
Yes. If you like to geek out on motorcycles as much as we do, then we'd love to have you. Anyway, have a good night, everybody, and we will have another broadcast coming up very shortly.
Good night.